Hi, this is Dr. Martina, your sexuality expert, and today we're going to talk about the third and last law of the body.
Our third law of the body is movement, and that is divided into external and internal movement. The external movement is determined by the movement of the body, and the question is how much or what kind of space do you take when you're walking down the street or when you're in bed having sex. Now, the internal movement is determined by the movement of oxygen. And the question here is, what kind of breath do you take when you're walking down the street or when you're having sex? Let's talk about the external movement first. The external movement, as mentioned earlier, is determined by the movement of the body. We can have a narrow space, we can take a narrow space while we're having sex, or we can go all the way out to the wide and variable or anything in between. The reason why it's important for you to know what kind of space you take, what kind of external movement you make with your body while you were having sex is because it does affect how you breathe, it affects your muscle tension, and it can affect how you feel about having sex. Now we come to the internal movement, which is determined by the movement of oxygen, our breath. We can either take a shallow breath or a deep breath or anything in between. But the quality and the efficiency of the breath is dependent upon the type of respiration that you use. You can either use a diaphragm breath, a belly breath, or a chest breath. The diaphragm breath and the belly breath are usually one and the same because they both move the belly, whereas the chest breath moves the chest. I think we can all agree that breathing is the most important task that our body does for us to keep us alive, and it does that thousands of times a day. So we really cannot talk about breath or breathing without mentioning the diaphragm muscle. It does not matter what type of breath you use, the diaphragm muscle is always involved. Maybe if you can think back to your high school biology class, you may recall that your lungs are like a bellows in the way they draw air into your body and exhale it out again. But your lungs are useless without your diaphragm muscle because it is the diaphragm muscle which does the pushing and pulling on your lungs to make them work. And that fact makes the diaphragm muscle one of the most important muscles of our body. As you can see from the drawing, the diaphragm muscle is a dome-shaped muscle. That's why you may have heard the name cupola or parachute. It is a thin skeleton muscle that sits at the base of the chest. It's located just below the lungs and the heart. It separates the chest from the abdominal. So when you take a breath, your brain sends an electrical impulse through your nervous system to your diaphragm muscle, telling it to do its thing. And its thing is, when we inhale, the diaphragm contracts and the muscle is flattened and moves downward. This creates a vacuum effect that pulls air into the lungs. It also creates space in your chest cavity and your lungs expand into it. When you exhale, the diaphragm relaxes and the parachute, as I call it, is raised and the air is pushed out of the lungs. Now this happens if we consciously think about breathing or if we don't think about breathing. And that is a good thing because otherwise, without this diaphragm muscle, I would not be sitting here and talking to you. And breathe. Did you take a breath through your mouth or through your nose? The suggestion is that you use your nose because the nose is a miraculous filter lined with tiny hairs called cilia. The cilia have many functions. They filter, humidify, and warm or cool the air, depending on the temperature, before it enters the lungs. It is estimated that cilia protect our bodies against about 20 billion particles of foreign matter every day. There's a lot of stuff in the air, and the nose keeps it out of your body. It's just amazing. At times, I understand breathing through your mouth is necessary, like when you have increased physical activity or you have a sinus congestion. But breathing in through your nose helps us take fuller, deeper breaths. Now let's look at the two types of breath and let's see which one is better for us, belly breathing or chest breathing. I am pretty sure that you have heard before that belly breathing is better than chest breathing, and here are the reasons why. Belly breathing allows deep breaths, and when we take a deep breath, we can stimulate the lowest part of the lungs where the blood is the richest of oxygen. The lower lung is also rich with parasympathetic nerve receptors, which is the nerve system that is associated with calming the mind and the body. The abdominal muscles help move the diaphragm, which gives you more power to empty your lungs, and that is a good thing. Chest breathing adds more stress to chest and shoulder, which can increase any difficulties you suffer with your lungs. Chest breathing stimulates the upper part of lung, which prompts us to hyperventilate, and it triggers the sympathetic nerve receptors, which results in the fight or flight reaction. It is important to remember that your body is built for this and not to overthink breathing. But when it comes to sexual activity, and in this case, sexual arousal, what we want to focus on is your belly breath and your belly breath only. Because remember, the abdominal muscle is one of the 3 large muscle groups that participate in sexual arousal.
So, this concludes the teachings of the third law of the body, and all in all, of all 3 laws of the body. So what we're going to do next week is I'm going to teach you how the 3 laws of the body interact with each other, how to influence each other. For instance, how rhythmic alterations can change your muscle tone or your range of motion. And I'm also discuss the fact that when you play with the 3 laws of the body, you not only can influence your physical experience during sexual arousal, but also your emotional experience. So if you have missed either one of these teachings about the laws before next week, please review them so you will be able to take full advantage of this wonderful lesson. I will see you then. Bye-bye.